Yeah, I ain't no suit-wearing businessman like you. You know, I'm just a gangster, I suppose, and I want my corners.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Five Corners Podcast. And on the other line, as always, we have Ace Maluza and Maris Doyodora. Good evening, gents.
Hey, the pirates of Prosciut, the brigands of Bracciol. Huh? I feel great. I got a haircut after 4 months. I could stop wearing hats during Zoom calls at work. And I feel a lot lighter, and I could not wear a hat during our pod. It's probably the first time ever. So,
There you go. That's a great point.
yeah.
Yeah,
Let's see what's happening underneath here.
I got a haircut too, but I did it myself, so I have my hat on.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Maris because I'm doing at home hair care at this point, so it's all good. All right, so let's jump right into it. We got a lot to talk about this week's Around the Corners podcast. So let's start with I would say, failed openings across the United States. Right now, there's 31 states showing rising infections, most of which are in the south and the west of our country. States such as California, Texas, where ACE is right now, Florida, Arizona, Mississippi, and South Carolina are displaying the most dramatic spikes. Florida and Texas governors late this week had to reverse their reopening plans due to the increase in infection. So obviously with ACE being in Texas, it's the most logical place to start. So maybe let's start with ACE. I mean, I know you had been letting us know about your concerns, seeing people kind of walking around, filling up restaurants. We certainly didn't know, at least, Mariska and I being in New Jersey, we were very, very worried about New York and New Jersey. We didn't realize that Texas was going to get to this point. So maybe you can let us know what you've been seeing out in the streets, what's been going on, and how the people are feeling about it right now.
Yeah, right on, man. I mean, I've already shared with you some things that I've observed so far, and we're worse off than we ever were. Even in March, obviously. I mean, there was a clear disregard to data and Governor Abbott's phase reopening plans. I mean, we reopened in the middle of May, and I feel it was too early, and he moved from one phase to the next too quickly. I don't even know if he even considered the numbers and compliance for businesses that opened up. And now it's that time of the year where summer, or for what for me feels like summer, which begins in the early parts of April and May even. Texans have been cooped up, they've been sheltered in place for 3 months, and people want to do summer things. I get it. And out here, people want to do Austin things. And by Austin things, I mean the tubing, the hiking on the greenbelt, the many trails that's available to us, paddle boarding on the lake, swimming in natural springs and watering holes, bar hopping on 6th Street, which is our equivalent to Bourbon Street, just to name a few. There's little room to track how distant you are from people partaking in these activities. And looking at things now, it's created a bit of a slingshot effect. I mean, yes, there are guidelines of social distance. Yes, there are guidelines that tell you to wear a mask, wash your hands, all these things that we need to consider when reopening, but the enforcement of these guidelines are hard enough as it is to track what more with this haphazard phased reopening plan. And couple that with the people with a complete disregard for the pandemic, i.e., people clamoring for their freedom, et cetera, and you have record spikes to the tune of 4,000 odd cases in one day, only to see another record shattered the following day, like nearly 6,000. Why? In May, in June. Oh, and you know what? And there's even a council member from my city that attended an anti-mask protest at the Capitol. I mean, it's unreal. I mean, there are pictures floating around of him standing in front of a line of law enforcement in riot gear opposing the very state government he swore an oath of office to represent. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's crazy. It really is.
So you've been out and about, right? You've gone shopping. I'm sure you've taken the kids out. You and Carl's have been driving around the city. What does it look like? Like, are the shops, are they packed? I mean, over here, there's still it's starting to reopen, right? But there's still a decidedly lower rate of population that's kind of moving about. What does it look like on the ground in the actual shops, the stores? I mean, obviously you went to get your haircut. How did that
Right.
look?
You know, from the outside, and I've really just observed things from driving. You know, I mean, we're just carrying on like we always have been. I go out, I do my runs, I run my errands, I do the grocery shopping. You know, I go to the major retail supermarkets here, and I can speak for the last time I was in HEB. That's the major retailing chain, supermarket chain in Central Texas. There are more people not wearing masks than there are people wearing masks, and it's evident that they're doing so out of defiance. And up until late April, it was mandatory, I guess, and then it became highly recommended, and now it's mandatory, as you've heard in the news. And how does this affect us? Well, thankfully, we're not as densely populated. Neighborhoods, cities, towns in the greater Austin area are considerably spaced out. So, like I said, we continue to do what we've always done: stay home. What will we do less of? Well, we haven't done much, if at all. I mean, outside of taking drives out with Carla and the kids, just to combat cabin fever, opening up our driveway, our garage to have them like bike like a short distance. And we're masked up, of course. Where at times the kids would join me in the past, I don't think they'll do that anymore as long as things continue to spike. And I already described the process and how I got my haircut. And things are moving about like nothing's going on. I see a lot of people outside of like Home Depot, no masks, out of like in front of like fast food restaurants, no masks. That's all fine and good. Things will sort themselves out eventually. I hope people eventually get hip to the idea, but I can't worry about everyone else outside of us. I got to take care of my own. So
Yeah, no doubt. So,
yeah.
any inkling from like maybe not neighbors, but people around you in the Austin area? I know your sister-in-law is in Houston, which is also being very hard hit right now. What are people thinking now that the governor is kind of, backtracking his initial reopening plans? Are they, I guess, are they taking this with more seriousness now at this point?
I would hope so. And from what I've observed, and we're all part of like communities on Facebook for our respective towns, right? Our
Right.
cities.
Sure. Yep.
All you have to do is take a peek into the comments, and that'll just give you the narrative.
Yeah.
I want to say it's split right down the middle, but it's not. It kind of leans towards no masks. We can't continue living in fear. I mean, I hear the same shtick from the same kind of people, but the numbers don't lie, and if you continue down this path, I mean, I don't even know if you want to send the kids to school in 6 weeks, and we open school early here. So
Is it that close? 6 weeks before the start of school?
middle of August,
Middle of
think
August.
about it. I'm already thinking it's July.
Right.
Uh, and another
Pretty
thing
much is, yeah.
and another thing to consider, thankfully we're like 30 minutes north of downtown where all the things are popping, all the people are running and they're on their trails, where people like to gather without any regard for social distancing. So we're away from that. Um, and yeah, Houston's hard hit. They're like the epicenter, if you want to call them that, as far as like rising cases and deaths.
Wow.
So yeah, if I was in my early 20s living single here, I probably wouldn't care. But that mindset doesn't apply to me anymore.
Yeah. So that was the other thing I wanted to talk about too with all you guys. Maersk, you too. What are your thoughts about walking into a school year? I know, Maersk, you got X in grade school. What are you feeling if there's no vaccine and there's no therapeutics? The governor in New Jersey basically created a broad stroke approach to say we're going to try to social distance the kids. All three of us have been into New Jersey elementary schools, right? There's no way you're going to social distance. There's just not enough space. So, Maersk, for you, what are you thinking about the return of schools come this September? Like A said, it's right around. If you think about it's already July, it's right around the corner.
I mean, I was talking with Fran, my wife, and it's scary to say the least because I think their plan is still actually to reopen, but they're going to keep the desks 6 feet apart. They're going to be using like a microphone for everyone to hear. Um, I don't. Honestly, I'm hoping they have a better plan to come up with when September rolls around. Homeschooling for us was pretty effective. Again, luckily, Fran is home, so she's able to take care of their homeschooling needs as as long as uh, our school provides the necessary materials. And our school did a good job of giving uh, them the lesson plans and just making them easy to follow along. I think our school in particular was I felt it was very much prepared for something like this, and they were pretty smooth because I have Xavier and Annalise who are going now into 5th and 1st grade respectively, and their teachers were prepped, and I'm hoping that they'll continue until an actual solid either vaccine is around or there's just a better plan than just to maintain like this social distance. It's going to be hard to control because our school is it's K through 5. It's hard to police all those kids without having any extra adults in the room, and then when you have extra adults in the room, that just causes like that's going to cause for more concern because the more bodies you're going to have in the room, the more susceptible you're going to be
Yeah.
to contracting it. Also, I was having a conversation yesterday with one of our friends from Jersey City, whose son has cochlear implants and goes to school, and it's going to be hard. She was saying for if they're going to be using the microphone and they're wearing masks because he usually reads lips if he's sitting in the back and can't hear well. That's something else that they got to kind of get a grasp of for students that need to actually hear what the teacher's saying. So I, I I'm hoping that in a combination with I guess their social distancing plan that they still have the option for them to do the work at home at least until it's totally safe. I mean, because I've got 3 here. One's a 1-year old also, and I don't want to take the risk. Basically.
Agreed. I think for us, we're lucky, all three of us, right? We have the ability to work from home. Especially for Maersk's case, Fran is home. Ace, I know you got a little bit more of your hands full because Carl's is going out, off hours from you, so that's a little bit of a tougher sled. But in general, we all can work from our home offices and be able to do our work and do the same thing. I feel badly for people that can't do that, right? I know for a fact that, although our school district did a generally good job, the work was sparse at best. And I think, again, they were held to a very tight timeline and you really couldn't generate a good lesson plan that kind of covered everything that was comprehensive. So we did a lot of supplemental stuff. I don't know how that's going to be to the point you made, Maersk, about homeschooling.
Hmm.
That's certainly a reality now. Like Lizelle and I are looking at it going, this might have to be a thing because to your point, you know, Linus has got pretty severe asthma. It's very tough on him, right? He got hospitalized for RSV. This could be much, much worse than that. So our concern is the same. Like you said, can 9-year-olds wear masks all day? That's a big question. Can
That's a
5
huge
year
question.
right? 5-year-olds will not be able to do it, right? So, they've been thinking about alternating days of school, but it certainly is a concern as parents for us about what are we going to do? What if one of us is told, Lizelle's been worrying a little bit about New York is starting to open. Her main office is in the city. If they tell her, hey, you have to be at work 3 days a week, how does that work? So it definitely, all the dynamics of this, to Ace's point about, people are kind of taking it lightly in some places, but certainly here, because we took the brunt of it early, a lot of these conversations are just starting to happen. And the reality is nobody's really prepared to think about what happens if this goes more than a year and a half, right? What do you do with the kids? I'm worried about a 3-year-old that has never seen other kids, right? We were supposed to start him in pre-K and daycare and all that stuff to be able to socialize him. Now he's not going to have that opportunity. What is he going to miss out? So all of these things beyond obviously the fear of the health issues that could come about with coronavirus, then you start to worry about, Okay, are they going to get good enough schooling? What about the social aspects? What about the sports? All that stuff kind of ropes in. And Ace, what are your thoughts on what are your plans going to be walking into this? I know you, like you said, you're going to have to run into this a lot quicker than me and Mash will be.
Yeah, it's coming at us hard. And I tell you what, I mean, the governor's already said, hey, we're good to go. Schools will be opening on time. And I'm like, dude, like, all right. Well, once he announced that, we got emails from our school district. So they're thinking about rolling out a blended plan. You go to school X amount of days, let's say 2 to 3 times a week, and then you could do homeschooling the rest of the week. Yeah, I think we're leaning towards homeschooling, the blended plan. But I mean, him saying that we're good to go is just tells you all you need to know about our governor and how he's approaching things. With a clear disregard for the data, and he's seeing the brunt of it now. And I just wanted to end my take with this. Okay, what's happening is embarrassing and could have easily been avoided. And with the governor placing restrictions on, let's say, the bars and restaurants again, I feel awful for these establishments who felt like they constantly readjusted to the new realities that the pandemic presented and having to manage the difficult balance of enforcing stricter safety standards to keep a business running. They've gone through so many changes already, and it's hard to ignore how these record shattering cases and hospitalizations that are happening 4 months after this went down will affect operations moving forward after we were able to see and observe how it affected New York, New Jersey,
Right.
and California. And that's unacceptable.
Yeah. I think to me, that's the part that I get annoyed with the most, right? You're talking about tens of thousands of deaths, to your point about New York and New Jersey, that happened months in advance. The whole point of that was you already had a precursor for what was going to happen. You knew from a governmental official standpoint what this was going to do to the population if you let it go unfettered, right? And to your point, because they adopted the philosophy of our president, which is just ignore it, it'll go away. He's been saying it'll go away since February. This is the byproduct of that, right? And I think what's
Right.
happening now is people are starting to realize, oh my God, we're in trouble. I think the panic is now setting in. And like I told you in a separate conversation you and I had, it's tough to put the toothpaste back into the into the toothpaste holder, right?
Right.
What do you do now? Now people have gotten a taste of this freedom. Now you're going to tell them all of a sudden pull back in, and that's the other thing that we should talk about today is now all of a sudden wearing a mask becomes political instead of it being a stance towards helping for the public good and for the good of the public health system. It's now become a political stance on whether or not you're Republican or a Democrat, which is to me insane because they've seen that mask wearing for both the wearer and somebody who you're going to come in contact with reduces particulate by like 70 to 80%. And that's how places like Singapore, South Korea have been able to keep this virus down without shutting down the economy. But like you mentioned, people are walking around flouting the fact that they aren't wearing masks, almost proud of the fact that they're not wearing a mask when in reality they're endangering lives. And I think that to me, that's the sick part about this whole thing. It's all of a sudden not a pandemic in their minds, but a political stance, which is totally crazy. What do you think, Mask?
Well, I mean, Jet, what about my civil rights? Man, so it's appalling to me just how selfish people can be. So I luckily when we've been out shopping, I haven't had to, yell at anybody for, just not being considerate of anybody else. For the most part, when I've gone and some stores opened up on Route 17 this week. We actually we're going to an isolated camping trip for the 4th this week, so we had to get some supplies. We went to Burlington Coat Factory on 17, and there was a line. There was there's a line going out the door, and
Wow.
wow, yeah, but you understand if you actually know what's going on that they have to let a certain number of people in.
Sure. Sure.
and making sure that they're having masks,
Yep.
so that they're practicing social distancing. Which is, so with that understanding, I didn't care, because like we were used to having to go to BJ's, Costco, and stuff like that. They're already doing that stuff around here.
Right.
But yeah, the audacity of the older, for lack of a better term, and I'm being nice, the older generation complaining that they're not handling this well. You need to let more people in, blah blah blah. I was like, I almost wanted to, and she wasn't waiting in line for that long, because Fran had gone in before me, and I waiting in the car because the baby was asleep, and then I was waiting for him to wake up. So I went on, and so I was waiting online for little less than 10 minutes, and I got in. I went inside. Fran was already online to pay, so we got out of there about 15 minutes. This lady wasn't online when I was online, so I know that she wasn't waiting that long, and she had the audacity to yell at uh, the Burlington workers. Said, you're not making this happen fast enough. I need to get in there. Blah blah blah. It's so hot out here, and it's like, come on, man. If this was such a concern for you, you should have waited in your air conditioned car and just prepare. It's I feel like everybody that's complaining about everything right now is a lack of preparation, and just a lack of concern for everybody else around them. And it's disheartening to see just how selfish certain people really are. And it's I can't sometimes, man, because there's a majority of the people understand and know what's going on, and they they're willing to sacrifice their whatever, their liberties, for the sake of everybody else. And it's just certain people just either are very anal and just need to follow this routine, that they've been following since they were born, and just need to just you need to change. Like, people need to just adjust and you know get with the program so that we all can move on. That's the whole thing. I think, especially in the states that are tried to reopen too quick and are now feeling the wrath of what's happening, that you brought that on themselves, and that's what makes me angry, and that's why, like, I'm very animated right now, just because we all want to get through it. But it takes a team, and it takes understanding, and it's just, there's people out there we're realizing now that are just a lot more selfish than others.
Yeah. The other part too that we talked about was, this is one of those, and again, we're getting close to 200,000 Americans that have died or that will die, right? If, like, you and I, all three of us have talked about this. If this was a more visceral disease, right? Like, we made the joke of, like, what if it was Raiders of the Lost Ark and the guy's face is melting off, right? Would that scare people more than somebody going to the hospital, they disappear for 3 to 4 weeks, and then they pass away? Nobody, obviously the family is in deep, deep mourning, right? But again, it's not as visceral as, Ebola, with your flesh is kind of falling off, right? It's difficult for people to kind of conceptualize what's happening here. And back to your point about the public good, Fauci today said we more than likely, even with a vaccine, will not get herd immunity. And he cited the reason as he believes that only 60% of Americans, if a vaccine is found, will actually get the vaccine. So think about that, guys. They're rushing, right? They're going through light speed to try to get a vaccine out the door, therapeutics out the door, but only 60% of Americans will actually go out and receive this vaccine. And this is not anything new, right? Measles has come back. A lot of other diseases that we thought we've killed have come back because of the persistence of the Karens of the world to not vaccinate their kids, right? But here we are in the middle of a pandemic, and the number one epidemiologist is saying more than likely we're not going to get herd immunity as a country because people will just not get vaccinated, and they don't believe in what that vaccine can do. What do you guys feel about that? I mean, like you said, we're going through all of this hell and back, right? Lives, economy, jobs, schooling, sports, all of it. We're going to find the vaccine, and then people won't believe the vaccine. That's what infuriates me.
The Raiders of the Ark analogy is perfect because it's something that you've seen, you feel like the terror of everything was there. In relation to what we're seeing right now with, the social justice kind of like reckoning, everyone's now recording stuff so that everybody knows what's going on. Had a COVID been a little bit more of a, like you said, visceral, even more a visual, had a more of a visual representation of what is going to happen to you when if you're unlucky enough to contract it, I think more people would take it seriously. Now, I never want that to happen. Like I've already had, I've had to suffer through a couple of deaths in the family due to this, so I already know what I'm doing. It's I hate for like it's I feel like that's that's what it's gonna take for everyone to kind of wise up, is to have it all hit home. Everyone that's not taking any precautions because it hasn't hit home in a specific way that it has a lot of other people, and unfortunately they need that type of wake up call. The rest of the world, or the rest of the country, needs that type of wake up call for any of this stuff to kind of hit them in the head.
You know what? I think a lot of the problems we're experiencing now could have been prevented if Biff, the commander in chief, had kind of stood tall from the beginning and was transparent in his communication and staved off from politicizing everything, and it would have been an easy ride through 2020 and another 4 years. All he could have said was, while wearing a mask, which we've never seen him wear, is, I'm going to invest lots of money and resources in stockpiling PPE equipment, making sure everyone gets tested, that we're contact tracing, and just like pulling out all the stops to reduce the spread. But instead, he's playing manipulation games. He's calling it a hoax. And with his base, if he just stood tall about it, they would follow suit. And that pretty much takes care of a huge chunk of the country that are fighting this right now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so here's the problem with
That's
that.
all
Right?
he could have done.
I know, but here's the, and here's the, it's like lemmings walking off a cliff, right?
Yeah.
Most of his base are elderly, right? Are above that 50-year-old mark where you consider them more high risk. The fact that he held a rally in Tulsa, as crappy and as winning as it wasn't, he still held it, right? He went to Arizona, hence is in Florida, in Texas. So to your point, he's completely dismissing the severity of this problem. And because of that, and again, maybe thankfully, America is starting to realize what a numbskull this guy is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because 80% of Democrats believe this is a real thing, and even 50% of Republicans, which is totally crazy to me, 50% of Republicans believe this is a real thing. So to your point, because he didn't do all the right things, it's becoming more and more evident now how much he's failed. If he had done the opposite, this might be a closer election in November, right? But the way it's going right now, the economy is going to tank again, because what's going to happen to these 31 states? Soon it'll be 40 states. It's going to grow because we let the horses out of the barn. It's going to be very difficult to rein them back in once they've gotten a taste of that freedom. One perfect example of this, right? The NBA is set to reopen, and this is kind of a pivot to our next topic, right?
Right.
It's set to reopen in Orlando, one of the states which has one of the highest rates of infection at this point right now. Governor DeSantis is not doing anything to kind of mitigate it. He's blaming young people. He's saying, oh, it's all these. First, he blamed testing, saying, hey, we're testing more. This is the reason why it's up. And now he's saying, well, it's young people, right? So with that said, and we kind of joked about it with Kyrie Irving, and he's kind of coming up with all these reasons why he doesn't want to play. With this as the backdrop, I don't blame the guy.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to be in Orlando starting July 30th, right? All the way through for the 22 teams. Of the 30 teams, 22 are going to be there. 16 of the 302 have already been infected. And they have just started doing preseason workouts, or pre-reseason workouts, I guess is the best way to put it, right?
Right.
Do we expect that it's going to get better or worse, right?
You know what? That's a perfect segue to the NBA restart. We're going to be seeing preseason quality basketball to start.
We will.
And they're going to be playing under unprecedented circumstances with really little to no time to tune up, right? I mean, have teams kept tabs on their players the past 4 months? Have they been working out? Have they been eating right? Have they even hooped? I mean, there's too many moving parts to consider to make any kind of definitive claims about what will or will not happen. And in a way, that's bad, but for me, good, because I think it's gonna make for some really entertaining.
We're gonna be laughing. There's gonna be some crazy memes coming out of the season, man.
Speaking of selfishness, I think us as sports fans, I feel like our selfishness is kicking in because we need to see something,
Right.
and
I'll watch crappy.
Totally is.
We're willing to watch preseason summer basketball in order for us just to get our fix. And I mean, to your point, guys, like I don't blame Kyrie Irving for not. I don't blame anybody that's already backed out because he's not the only one.
Oh, right, true.
He's not the only one that's backed out. I don't blame them for backing out. I'm interested in to see what's gonna happen, especially with this format, and especially with how we know this season had been going already. Like the Lakers were on top, the Clippers are on top. There are teams too fighting for the bottom seeds for the playoffs that are really dependent on this beginning part of the reseason, because they're basically playing for that last spot, and it's 8 games that they have to kind of get in there. That it's gonna be ugly. I think it's gonna be ugly. It's gonna be messy, but it's gonna be good TV.
So, and think about this, right? Just another inflection point with coronavirus. Let's say members of the starting 5 get infected mid-season, right? They have to quarantine them.
Yep.
So from a Vegas betting perspective, and I hate to throw that in there, but it's a big part of this, right? Now you have to worry about not just injuries, not just being out of shape, but now you have to worry about the plausibility that people are going to get coronavirus while in Florida during this reseason, which is a great name for what we just came up with on this one. But think about that. Let's say Anthony Davis gets it. I don't know if he's already tested positive once, but let's say one of the key crucial players on any given team gets infected. That is a significant impact on a basketball team. It's not like football where there's 55 guys, right? There's typically 10, 11 guys, especially come the playoffs. That bench gets down to about 8 or 9 people tops. So now you take one out with the virus, with the Rona, right? And that person's effectively out for 2 weeks. And again, to your point, Ace, now you're not in shape again. Now you got to go back through the whole cycle. So to Marisk's point, this is going to be a hell of a wild ride. I hate to have it, to be having a gamble on people's health, but this is what the NBA has decided. And to your point, we're junkies, right? I got to get my fix, and this is the way to do it, come hell or high water. So what do you guys, are you guys feeling guilt about all this?
No, because they're
no.
No,
I was like, he's gonna say no.
It's Adam Silver's call. He's rolling him out, and those players have a choice to play. And you're right. I mean, they could be in the middle of the playoffs, right? Let's say Giannis Antetokounmpo tests positive during the semifinals.
Right.
He's out.
Knock on wood, man.
Knock on wood. Guess what? He may not return for the rest of the playoffs.
Right.
He's like Miami Heat all the way, baby. It's truly going to be survival of the fittest. Okay, I might as well go out on a limb. Bam Adebayo, NBA Finals MVP. Okay.
Oh my God.
Look back on this pod when it happens.
Because he's the last one standing.
Yeah, it's gonna be like that. I think
might be the case. It's totally feasible, right? And the wild part about it is, what do you asterisk this season, this champion? Because like you said, it might be the Miami Heat for all we know, right? It might be the Brooklyn Nets, sans Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving. Who knows, right? It's gonna be wild.
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting to see. So let's say the worst case scenario happens for each team, and we're in the playoffs, and each of their stars starts going down with the virus. It's gonna be interesting to see who's gonna be left to step up, and how that's gonna impact their career going forward. So, you know, you'll hear it from me first if the Nets make it. You know, Spencer Dinwiddie. with everything else that he's brought on himself, might be the MVP of this year. But let's say it all works out, hopefully, and there's minimal infections at best. None of the stars get infected. The NBA is going to be setting the precedent for how every other sport is going to approach this going forward, and that's hopefully the best case scenario for us as sports fans, because if they do it right, hopefully the NFL, hopefully the MLB with a 60 game season coming up.
Listen,
why?
but think about it though. MLB regular season games might actually mean something, right?
Yeah.
It never used to before. You didn't care about baseball till October. At least I didn't. I mean, I love the Yankees, but you're kind of half paying attention up until about late September, early October, right?
Right.
So it might have some, the precedence is certainly not there, but now you might have some real gravity to the games. Okay, so the other part, right? The real American pastime. What about football? What's going to happen? So off-season college workouts have begun. Outbreaks have been happening in these college campuses, in these college weight rooms since they've started. One of the most prominent being Clemson, who had 37 of their 70 some odd, 80 some odd roster get infected, on top of trainers and assistant coaches. To Merrick's point, I think basketball you can kind of sequester, right? It's 10 people, 20 people tops. You're talking about football. There's 55 guys on one side, 55 guys on the other side, not to mention all the assistant coaches, all the coordinators. And then are we ready as in America to see a 70,000 person stadium be completely barren? Is that feasible? I mean, it's happened in Europe with soccer, right? With the other football, where they played, I believe it's the German league that began their season, and they started putting like paper cutouts of human beings in the stands and started pumping in noise, pre-recorded noise. But as Americans, the culture of tailgating, the culture in and around football, everything that happens with the religion of football, again, back to you, Ace, being from Texas, how does that work?
It doesn't. I mean, when you consider all the guidelines, you mentioned not only the players, the amount of players, but all the coaches, coordinators, and they have like all these position coaches, right? Linebacker coaches, right? Lineman coaches.
Right.
I mean, how do you even have everyone on the field? I mean, how do you effectively accomplish social distancing on the sidelines and everything else?
Literally called a huddle. Like every play, there's literally a huddle on offense and defense.
Right. It's going to be tough. I don't see how they could work it out. I mean, unless they tailor like viewing packages available to us, and we touched on this a few pods ago, a virtual experience, and just to make up for all the money and revenue they'd lose from like the concessions, the tickets, and everything else. But yeah, I'm curious to see what they're cooking up right now, because I have no clue.
But do you think, given what you've seen, that college football, I guess, the ones that run the college football programs, do you think they're willing to shut it down or say 25% capacity stadium, social distancing in the stands? Or to your point, is it so much of a cash cow that we all know the college football group is a wantonly greedy group, right? They've constantly tried to suppress college athletes trying to make money, trying to maintain amateurism, so to speak. So from their standpoint, like you said, they're out here about to lose billions upon billions of dollars. Are they going to forego that, or are they going to say, we'll roll the dice? People are going to make decisions. We'll do temperature checks on the way in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I haven't even seen any like discussions or reports or stories about like what the plans are for football in the collegiate and professional level. So until we see that, I don't see how it works, especially here in Austin. And the Longhorns. We don't have a professional sports team. That's as close to a professional sports team as it's
Sure.
going to get. I mean, everyone loves Longhorn football here, and everyone loves going downtown every Sunday to tailgate and everything else. They have the Bevo Walk. That's the name of the actual Longhorn, the mascot.
Right.
And it's just a completely crazy fan experience. And clearly that's going to change. And they may have to eliminate it altogether. But they love the Longhorns so much. I mean, they're going to want the football to be played. So whatever happens around it, it's up in the air. I really don't know how it's going to work.
I don't know. I mean, like you said, it's too much of a cash cow for them to shut it down. For NCAA sports in general, for them to shut down anything I would think would have to take a lot, because these sports programs, I mean, a lot of them depend on the TV, depend on just the fans watching to fund stuff for their school. So I don't, unless they've already come up with stuff in place, like it, I don't see it succeeding, only because, like you said, there's it's too dense of a sport
Right.
for any type of precautions to effectively take place. And it's interesting, because I had just seen, back to basketball wise, in China, Beijing versus Shanghai, and I've been keeping tabs on Jeremy Lin, so they're playing. So I
With
wonder.
fans in the stand?
So it's hard for me to tell from the clip that I'm watching, but there's obviously the teams and the officials and like press in the, you can see them in the stands, or like right now. The camera never pans up to actually see if there's anybody at the games, but there's still people in the vicinity. So it's kind of hard. So maybe this is where the NBA is going to go. But again, for back to, if it's football, the fan base is too I the fan base is too rabid. The cash cow of it all being, the way it is too much. So I don't see it, if they don't shut it down. I don't see how they can effectively make it happen in a safe way.
Yeah, I agree. So our last topic for tonight, coming back around, I know everything has kind of been driven by the coronavirus, but social justice and reforms are still, being cried for by the people, right? So we're still protesting the systemic racism and the police brutality that led to the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. Details are coming out now about Elijah McClain's death and obviously countless others. What's happening, though, is that there's a ripple effect across media, just, print media, web media in general. A large part of the Black and people of color staff members in a lot of these publications have now started to come out regarding unequal pay, the toxic culture that's been leveled against, by POC staff members there. And it really was catalyzed by Bon Appetit magazine when an email conversation came out with their editor-in-chief, Adam Rappaport, where he was basically telling a Hispanic writer not to publish a Puerto Rican recipe because it's just not accessible to their fan base. With that, they unearthed some Twitter pictures of him in brownface, dressed as an urban Latino for Halloween. And that obviously rippled through the staff And again, the outcry began with individual staff members claiming that they're not getting paid for their on-camera appearances, while white counterparts were not only getting paid, but were also being prominently placed in videos by Bon Appetit, and then obviously getting endorsements because of being prominently placed on their extremely popular YouTube platform. And then again, the cascading effect of that, culture, Vulture Magazine, let's see, LA Times, Complex, The Ringer. Bill Simmons has been called out publicly by his Ringer union about the unfair practices that are happening there as well. So, me personally, I believe this is great. I think we've come to a point in America where people are just not going to stand for this anymore. And I think it's the beginning of large scale corporations really being forced, because you knew they were not going to do this of their own volition, right?
Right.
But they are now being forced to reckon with the injustices that are happening in their corporations on a day-to-day basis relative to people of color and Black and Indigenous people. So what do you guys think about that? I believe it's going to continue, but what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think, a common theme with our discussion surrounding systemic racism, the Black Lives Matter movement is, just to keep the conversations going, right?
Right.
Like continue to have the uncomfortable conversations. Um, Shout out to who's my man that hosts the uncomfortable conversations with the Black Men YouTube
Oh,
channel.
Acho.
There you go.
Yeah.
I should know this. He's from the University of Texas.
Yeah, he's a Texas guy.
Yeah, thanks, Chet, for the save.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just got to keep that going, and with regards to cancel culture, I mean, you mentioned the Ringer. I think that's a nice thing to talk about because we all listen to the Ringer. Maris references, the redraftables. I mean, I love their content, and it's great stuff. I've enjoyed the few redraftables episodes that I've listened to the past few days. With regards to Bill Simmons, poor choice of words. I don't think he meant it as a dig to Black talent. He's not perfect. No one is. I think he'll learn and move on from this and improve on diverse hiring. And I think he's an example of the cancel culture going too far. I mean, how long until we call out Jim Carrey for going green face in the mask? Or how long until cancel culture catches up to Tropic Thunder? Calling out brands, movies, shows, people, and everything in between, I think we forget to consider the sensibilities and moral boundaries of their respective times that were drastically different on what we perceive to be inappropriate and appropriate. And we talk about this all the time. It's funny as hell about how the homoeroticism in the 80s, for example, was
True.
like rampant, unbeknownst to us as children, in the cartoons and the movies we watch and the hyper violent movies.
Right.
Shout out to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe,
It's Adam.
riding Condor, and Apollo and Rocky, in a nice sweet embrace at the end of a sprint. I mean, you got to draw the line somewhere with regards to cancel culture.
Yeah, to me, what went overboard was when they tried to cancel culture Chase from Paw Patrol.
Yes.
Oh Jesus.
Right?
So let me say my piece on this.
Go for it. Go for it.
There's an intelligence factor that has to go into everything that you're quote unquote canceling. There's got to be, because you need to be able to tell the difference of what is actually something that is, causing racial oppression, something that's, against the social justice parameters that the cancelers are setting for themselves. You need to be smart enough to know what needs to be canceled and what doesn't. Now, the problem with that is everyone's view on what needs to be canceled is different because of their own personal agenda and for things that they personally just don't like. Where I drew the line was at Chase with Paw Patrol, but there's another thing that's going on with this gentleman that's part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. Sean King, correct.
Yeah.
He said something to the effect: we have all these monuments coming down of people from history that were slave owners or were, just racial oppressors from the past that were erected these monuments for whatever reason. And I agree with that. A lot of them need to come down. Where I draw the line in my personal belief is that what he said is that having a people worship a white Jesus is also part of white supremacy and systemic racism. And I'm just like, no, I don't agree with that at all. It might be the view of some people, but it's something that there's a belief there that is deeply rooted in everybody's heart as far as Jesus and God and anybody else's religion goes, right?
Yeah.
There's a point where you're projecting your own beliefs, your personal beliefs, not exactly what's good for you know the good of humanity, for I guess lack of a better term. I'm losing the words here, but there's where cancel culture gets muddled is when you start projecting your own kind of insecurities and beliefs into something that only has to do with you and not for the good of everybody else. So that's evident in that. That's evident in canceling Chase from Paw Patrol. It's evident in canceling anything that's really doesn't have to do with anything that we're trying to push forward as human beings.
Yeah. So for me, I totally agree with you guys, right? So the first part about this is, like you said, Maersk, there's definitive things that need to be called out that are violating justices and equality point blank across the board when it comes to corporations, their hiring practices, their pay practices, their inclusion practices. All of that needs to be scrutinized, right? Because companies are not good at that. They've been embedded with the systemic racism that we've been talking about. So they need to be called out on that. Totally agree with that. The problem that I have, to your point, Maersk, is, a lot of these things are totemic in nature, right? Like Jesus, right? Jesus is symbolic. Now, the guy who drew white, we all know Jesus is not white. Jesus is Palestinian. The problem with that is people have, to your point, Maersk, reflected their beliefs on a white Jesus for whatever that means. I personally believe in a brown Jesus, but it is what it is. There's a black.
Is what it is, yeah.
Right. That's a belief system, right? That's intrinsically built in you. That doesn't mean I look at a white guy and go, "There's my Jesus," right?
Right.
It's a nebulous thought that you've kind of anthropomorphized into a picture of some dude, whether that's white, brown, black, or white. That's a belief system that you own.
Or Ewan McGregor.
Oh, right.
Ewan McGregor, right?
Right. Taking down monuments is a completely different story, right? Because those were real people that did real heinous things. One of the things that happened here in my town was we took down a Christopher Columbus statue. Why? Because historically, Christopher Columbus didn't even discover America. So a lot of the rebuttals that we got was, well, you're erasing history. We're not erasing history, because the history that you've learned is actually incorrect history. He was actually a spice trader. He made a wrong turn. He was thinking he was going to Asia, and he ended up in the Bahamas, right? But he was a slaver, and he committed genocide, ecocide, all that stuff. So honoring him with a statue, just like honoring a Confederate general, makes no sense, right? These are people you don't want to honor. That's why there's no statues of Hitler. That's why there's no statues of Stalin. You need to take those down because they are symbols of oppression of a people, right? Chase and Paw Patrol, right? Canceling Brooklyn Nine-Nine, right? Now, granted, can Brooklyn Nine-Nine be more prescient because of all that's happening when it comes to police brutality? Absolutely, right? But to sit there and say that we should stop Brooklyn Nine-Nine as a sitcom because it paints the light, just like Chase and Paw Patrol, that cops are good, that makes no sense to me. Why would you there are a majority of the cops that are out there are good people, are good cops. There are bad apples, and there are bad apples that watch other bad apples do bad apple things. Those are the ones that we need to take care of. To sit there, to your point, Maersk, and cancel out the entirety of all of the good things that cops have been able to do in that profession makes no sense, right? To your point, you're reflecting your own insecurities about police officers onto Chase, the guy from Brooklyn Nine, whatever you want to use. That to me is the issue with it. Now, should we be, and I've heard this happen over the last couple of days, a lot of the Simpsons will no longer be using white actors, right, to voice minority characters, right? BoJack Horseman, same thing. A lot of these animated shows are now going, we should look at other Asians or other people of color to potentially voice these things. Now, me personally, if it gives those people more opportunity, then I'm okay with it. If actors are willing to say, I'm going to give this up in order to let other actors have a voice in this, I'm okay with that because that's a decision. Should we force people out because there was a directorial decision to put that actor in? No, because again, this is art, right? Dave Chappelle has said heinous things on stage. You're not going to sit there and say, well, I have to have Dave Chappelle not say any more stuff because, he's saying bad things about black people too, right? You can't do that. It's still art, and you still need to be able to express yourself, in that platform.
Here's where I don't, the Simpsons thing I don't totally agree with. I agree with the part where you want to give minorities more opportunities to voice characters that, will represent them. But if that's why you want to do it, okay. But what if the three of us were to shut off our cameras right now and we didn't have the Filipino flag flying around in our logo and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, and I don't mean this as an insult, you guys, just quote unquote, we sound pretty American, right?
Sound like a couple of white dudes to me.
We sound like three white dudes, more or less.
More or less.
But
I'm urban and proud though, so
right. So, but if you were to cast me to do the voice of a white guy, that's where I get confused. Like what? Because I can sound like I can sound right.
Yeah.
I can sound like a white guy.
Yeah.
And it's that's where that gets confusing. So again, this is where I think the intelligence factor has to come in. You need to know what you're actually, because it's, as someone that's been trying to break into the voice acting thing, I've been training myself to be able to do different types of voices, different types of ethnicities, as non-stereotypical as possible, but true to the accent. There's a difference between you doing a stereotypical quote unquote black person's voice, quote unquote Indian person's voice, and there's there there's a truth there to how you portray that character. It doesn't have to be, the stereotypical, representation of it, but the voice is the voice.
The accent is the accent.
The accent's the accent, and there's nothing, you can't deny that. That's something that you exists, and for all intents and purposes, the accent is the authenticity if you're doing it respectfully. And I think that's where the intelligence factor comes in. You got to portray it in a respectful way. The whole thing with Apu, yes, stereotypical as heck, the way that he's been represented. But if they were to come back with something a little bit more, intelligent with the character, you don't need to cancel Apu. I think you can rework him. I think the damage has been done though already with that character, so I understand why.
It's a 30-year-old show.
It's a 30-year-old show, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that to me is my problem. Like Ace said before, about it's tough to judge them in the time that we're in right now. All in the Family, right? The Jeffersons. All of these shows are relative to their own time, right? Family Guy, right? Could you produce Family Guy now? Probably not, right? So I agree with Ace. I think you need to be able to look at it and say, are people sorry for these types of portrayals, right? Can they do better? And are they willing to let go of those stereotypes for a more well-rounded look at that, that culture that ethnicity, that race. That to me is a better approach. To sit there and just say blanket cancel anything, to me is an easy way out, right? That's people being lazy. And to your point, Maris, not applying intelligence to the decision making. Now, if you're able to engage somebody from that culture and bring in aspects of that culture that most people don't know beyond the stereotype, that's the ideal scenario. Don't tell me I'm going to cancel out Apu, because Apu is a character on the show. Now, like you said, can he be modeled now to look more like a modern day Indian person? Sure, you can do that, right? But to sit there and say, I'm going to backtrack and wipe out all of the offensive things that have happened before this point in time, I think there's a lot more things that we have to face that have so much more value and weight, that doing cancel culture on everything is just wasting people's time and energy when it should be focused on things that are more consequential in the world. What do you think, Ace?
I agree. You guys hit the nail on the head. I don't think there's anything else I could offer aside from the fact that you could cast me in an animated version of The Sopranos, and I'll tell you why. I have street cred. I grew up. I grew up not too far from where Chrissy Moltisanti, okay, shared an apartment with what was his first girlfriend's name?
Um,
Oh my God.
I just watched Adriana.
Adriana.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, literally right up the block from Jet's parents' house. I could pull it off, guys. You know, and people wouldn't bat an eye. Just saying. I'm just saying.
All right. Okay. So I appreciate everybody jumping on tonight. I think this is, we're going to continue down this path with this coronavirus. Hopefully we do a 180, but it doesn't look like we're in for that anytime soon. We hope everybody stays healthy. Stay indoors if you can. Don't go out if you don't have to. We know social distancing is hard and quarantining is hard, but really, please, for the good of the public health, do it for everybody. With that, we will see you next time. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.